Florida is a prehistoric swamp crawling with 84 mosquito species. Yet somehow Disney World, a 40-square-mile resort, stands out as an almost bug-free bubble in the heart of this flying blood bank. The reason isn't pixie dust, but a secret war strategy led by a real Army general, Joe Potter, recruited in 1964 to fight nature itself. How did a man who battled malaria in Panama turn a mosquito apocalypse into a kingdom for mouse-eared tourists? The answer begins with engineering that borders on military paranoia, and the stakes are higher than most guests ever realize. Orlando sits on a prehistoric sponge, where the air is so thick with humidity you could almost bite into it. This is a place where puddles don't just linger, they multiply. Every ditch, pothole, and forgotten flower pot is a 5-star nursery for something with wings and a thirst for blood. The state's official decor is stagnant water, and the soundtrack is the high-pitched whine of insects plotting their next meal. Florida's wetlands are a paradise for at least 84 different mosquito species, each one perfectly adapted to the muggy chaos. Some specialize in dawn raids, others prefer dusk, and a few are bold enough to hunt all day. The sheer scale is staggering. 27,000 acres of swamp, lakes, and marshland, all marinated in heat and standing water. Mosquitoes here aren't just a nuisance, they're a fact of life, as reliable as the afternoon thunderstorm. The locals swap stories of clouds so dense you can lose a car in them, and tourists quickly learn that bug spray is as essential as sunscreen. This is no ordinary battleground. It's a living, buzzing gauntlet where the enemy is invisible, relentless, and everywhere. Yet, inside this mosquito metropolis, one patch of land stands oddly serene. The rest of Florida may be a buffet for biting insects, but Disney's domain is a fortress, an engineered bubble where the only thing that stings is the price of bottled water. The question isn't why mosquitoes thrive here, it's how anyone could possibly keep them out. Walt Disney didn't just want a theme park, he wanted a kingdom immune to Florida's most persistent enemy. For that, he needed someone who knew how to win a war against mosquitoes. Enter Major General William Joe Potter, fresh from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and a stint as governor of the Panama Canal Zone. Potter had spent the late 1950s orchestrating the survival of thousands of workers in one of the world's most mosquito-infested regions, where malaria was less a threat and more a daily certainty. In Panama, he learned that the secret wasn't poison or brute force. It was logistics, drainage, discipline, and relentless attention to every puddle. In 1964, Walt Disney spotted Potter at the New York World's Fair and saw more than a military man. He saw a strategist who could turn a swamp into a safe haven. Potter wasn't hired to design roller coasters. He was recruited to command the invisible front lines, applying the same meticulous planning that moved armies across continents to the business of banishing bugs. He approached the Orlando wetlands with the mindset of a battlefield engineer, mapping every low spot, every ditch, every inch of saturated ground, as if the fate of the mission depended on it. Potter's obsession with water movement bordered on the fanatical. He once quipped that the only good mosquito is a drowned one, and he meant it. Under his direction, engineers began carving out the veins and arteries of what would become Disney World's circulatory system. A vast network was designed to keep water flowing and mosquitoes guessing. The man who once tracked malaria outbreaks in Panama now spent his days scrutinizing the life cycle of a Florida larva, determined that the only thing multiplying on Disney property would be the crowds. Joe Potter didn't walk into Florida with blueprints. He came armed with a battle plan. To him, the swamp wasn't just wet ground, it was enemy territory. He famously compared standing water to enemy trenches. Every puddle was a stronghold, every ditch a supply route waiting to be seized. The mission was simple in theory: deny the enemy a place to breed, and you win the war before the first bite. But in practice, It meant charting every inch of soggy land, scrutinizing rainfall patterns, and calculating how fast water had to move to outpace a mosquito's life cycle. Potter's notebooks filled with sketches that looked more like invasion maps than landscaping diagrams. He broke the property into sectors, assigning each a risk level based on soil, shade, and proximity to lakes. Engineers got marching orders: no low spot left unmonitored, no gutter allowed to clog, and no surface left flat enough to collect so much as a teaspoon of rain. He insisted on redundancy. If one channel failed, another would pick up the slack. The plan called for a network of canals, sluices, and hidden pipes to keep water moving at all times, turning the entire property into a dynamic battlefield where the enemy never got a foothold. Potter's attitude was pure military. If you want to keep mosquitoes out, you have to think like one, and then outmaneuver them at every turn. Under his command, the war wasn't fought with chemicals or luck. It was fought with discipline, data, and the relentless movement of water. The blueprints for Disney World's mosquito defense read less like a theme park plan and more like the logistics for a major amphibious landing. Every ditch, every drain, every inch accounted for in the campaign, to protect the Magic Kingdom from the swamp that surrounded it. Excavators rolled onto the soggy Orlando plain and began scooping up Florida muck by the ton, trading cypress roots for a future kingdom. 7 million cubic yards of soil vanished to carve out the Seven Seas Lagoon, a man-made lake that doubled as both a scenic backdrop and a tactical moat. But this was just the opening move. Potter's engineers laced the property with a 100-mile grid of canals and culverts, a system so sprawling it could wrap around the city of Orlando itself. These weren't your average drainage ditches. Each one was mapped and measured with military precision, designed to keep water moving at all times, never lingering, never giving mosquitoes a chance to settle in. The construction crews worked with a kind of relentless paranoia, treating every patch of standing water like a breach in the perimeter. Canals snaked through the property, some straight as a rifle barrel, others curved to look more like natural rivers after Walt Disney himself insisted on aesthetics. Sluice gates and hidden sensors were installed throughout, quietly regulating the flow so that even during a Florida downpour, the water didn't dare stick around. The result was a landscape that looked effortless, but ran on constant, invisible motion. While most cities brace for flash floods and puddle-strewn streets after a summer storm, Disney's roads and walkways dry in minutes. The ground itself acts as a giant sponge, channeling runoff into the labyrinth below and out toward the Everglades. It's a system built on the belief that the only good puddle is one that's already gone. The sheer scale is hard to grasp. 100,000 linear feet of engineered water routes, all functioning as a silent army against the mosquito threat. In the end, what looks like a fairy tale on the surface is actually a masterclass in swamp warfare, with every inch of land accounted for in the ongoing campaign to keep the Magic Kingdom bite-free. Rainfall in Central Florida isn't just a weather event, it's a tactical challenge. On Disney property, the answer isn't brute force, but a network of smart hydraulics that quietly outmaneuver the swamp. Beneath the manicured lawns and winding sidewalks, a web of sensor-controlled sluice gates stands guard. These gates are more than simple flood doors. They're equipped with real-time monitors that track water levels, flow rates, and rainfall across the entire 27,000-acre property. When a storm rolls in, sensors send instant data to central controllers, which then open or close gates with military precision. Water is channeled away before it can ever become a breeding ground, redirected through canals and out toward the Everglades. The system reacts in seconds, sometimes shifting the direction of flow to balance pressure or prevent overflow in low-lying areas. Every gate is part of a larger choreography. If one area starts to rise, others compensate, ensuring that no single patch becomes a stagnant pool. The sensors are so sensitive they can detect a change in water level from a single heavy downpour and trigger a cascade of responses downstream. Even during the kind of summer storms that turn highways into rivers, Disney's roads and walkways stay dry. This isn't just drainage. It's a living, breathing defense grid that adapts to the swamp's every move. While guests stroll between rides, the hydraulics are quietly rerouting thousands of gallons of water, keeping the mosquito playbook one step behind. The end result is a landscape that drains itself, guided by a system that never sleeps and never lets its guard down. The architecture at Disney World is less about fairy tales and more about fighting a war with rainwater. Every building is a weapon in disguise, engineered to make sure not a single drop lingers long enough to tempt a mosquito. The Grand Floridian Resort, with its steep Victorian roofs and ornate spires, isn't just showing off, it's hustling water away at record speed. Rain hits those angles and slides right off, vanishing before it can pool. Hidden gutters snake along the edges, quietly funneling runoff into the labyrinth below. Even the iconic geodesic sphere of Spaceship Earth isn't immune to the paranoia. Its panels are fitted with concealed channels that whisk water straight into underground drains, so the surface stays bone dry. No matter how hard the Florida sky opens up, the obsession doesn't stop at the rooftops. Trash cans across the parks sport domed lids, all curves and no flat spots, designed so that not even a teaspoon of water can settle. Benches tilt ever so slightly, walkways slope just enough, and decorative planters are built with drainage in mind. Anywhere a puddle could form, the designers have already declared it a security risk and engineered it out of existence. It's a kind of architectural paranoia that borders on genius. Every flourish, every angle, every hidden gutter is part of a silent campaign to keep the enemy at bay. The effect is so seamless that guests barely notice. They see castles and futuristic spheres, not the invisible drainage army working overtime beneath their feet. In this kingdom, even the buildings are enlisted in the war against the swamp, turning the entire property into a fortress where mosquitoes simply can't get a foothold. Inside a nondescript building, past the parade floats and behind the scenes, Disney's mosquito surveillance lab hums with quiet urgency. The operation is run by people like Steve Ramirez, who jokes that his job is to outthink a creature with a brain smaller than a sesame seed. His toolkit isn't a can of bug spray. It's a dashboard covered in population charts, blinking alerts, and the data streams from nearly 60 carbon dioxide traps hidden across the property. These traps spend every night exhaling a faint puff of carbon dioxide, perfectly mimicking a warm human breath. Mosquitoes, especially the egg-laden females, home in on the scent, expecting a meal, and instead wind up in netting destined for the lab freezer. Each morning, technicians like Dr. Carlos Rizzo suit up in lab coats and sort through trays of captured insects. Under magnifiers, they count species, check for eggs, and log everything into the system. The lab's dashboard lights up with real-time hotspots, letting the team zero in on trouble before it spreads. Instead of fogging the entire resort with chemicals, they can target a single acre of woods or a neglected planter. But the surveillance doesn't stop with bugs in a net. In quiet corners, sentinel chickens peck at their feed, utterly unaware they're the park's feathered spies. Every week, technicians draw tiny blood samples to test for antibodies against West Nile and other viruses. The chickens don't get sick, but their immune systems act as an early warning system. If a virus shows up in the birds, the lab knows exactly where to focus its next move. This is mosquito warfare by the numbers, where precision beats brute force, and the real magic is in the data. Gambusia holbrooki, the mosquito fish, patrol the canals and ponds of Disney World with the appetite of tiny aquatic vacuum cleaners. Each one can devour hundreds of mosquito larvae a day, quietly turning every ditch and decorative pond into a front line against the next generation of bloodsuckers. Above the water, bats clock in for the night shift. Nestled in wooden houses on the edges of Bay Lake, these nocturnal hunters swoop through the humid air, each one capable of eating its weight in insects before sunrise. Daytime brings purple martins and dragonflies, nature's own air force, circling above the crowds, working for free while guests snack on churros below. But the arsenal doesn't stop with teeth and wings. Maintenance crews arm themselves with garlic, not for pizza, but for pest control. A barely there mist of garlic extract is sprayed across the park, undetectable to humans, but overwhelming to a mosquito's senses. The dose is so low, most guests never notice, but to an insect, it's a wall of pure misery. Growth regulators add another layer, freezing larvae in developmental limbo so they never grow up to bite anyone. Dr. Emily Torres from the Florida Department of Health points out that even this fortress has its vulnerabilities. In 1990, a deadly encephalitis outbreak killed 11 people across Florida, forcing a hard look at mosquito-borne risks. In 1997, virus scares led Disney to close water parks early and ask guests to cover up. The Zika panic of 2016 brought free repellent kiosks and warning signs at every entrance. Disney's invisible war never ends. It just adapts. For every bat and fish on patrol, there's a reminder that the swamp is always waiting for its chance. Today, Disney's mosquito battle is a silent arms race, one that grows more urgent as climate change pushes disease-carrying species deeper into Florida every year. The magic isn't in erasing nature, but in outsmarting it, day after humid day. In a world where viruses adapt as fast as engineers, vigilance is the real fairy tale ending. What would you engineer to keep the bugs at bay?